But speaking of interesting topics, tonight is a good one.
Yeah, so Camp Lejeune is an interesting, I'm sure if you've watched any form of media or television, radio, or anything recently, you've seen all the advertisements for Camp Lejeune service members and their families.
Yeah.
And so we thought it best to go ahead and talk about it on our show because that affects, I can't tell you how many people we've had give us a call and say, I had somebody call me last week to say, can you help us? My husband died back in 2001. Okay,
Wow.
We were stationed at Camp Lejeune many years ago, and the answer to that was yes. I think we can help them.
That's great.
So we have tonight on Calle Mendenhall.
Yes.
She's a partner in our office, and she's spearheading that litigation for us.
That's great.
And so we want to answer anybody's questions out there that they may have. You can go online, you can read a lot of stuff on the internet. Some of it may be embellished, some of it just may be accurate or it may not be. And we're here to kind of set the record straight for anybody that has a question about it. So it affected, potentially not just hundreds of thousands of people, but maybe even, a million people or more. So
It's heartbreaking.
it's a big deal. And it's interesting, the story behind how we got to where we are is very interesting. I'll let Calle talk about it. But for once, the federal government has stepped up and said, hey, can we compensate these families?
Wow.
And that doesn't happen all the time.
Well, Calle is always a great resource, and so always glad to have her here. And thank you, Calle, so much for being here with us tonight. Talk a little bit. We have a caller on the line, but before we get to that caller, I think there's a lot of folks at home who just may not know the backstory. So give us a little bit of the backstory and what exactly we're talking about. Want that caller to stay right there. We're going to get to you, but let's just do a little bit of an education, if we can, first of all.
Sure. So Camp Lejeune is really the base training camp for all Marines in the country. It is in North Carolina, and essentially the actual Marine with their families would be sent to this camp in various sectors, and that's where they would receive their training. That's where they would, wait to be deployed and so forth. Well, stemming back from as early as 1953, there were these contaminants and volatile compounds in the water system. So that means it was in the drinking water, the water that you wash your hair with, the water you brush your teeth with, everything that you're doing with that general water supply was contaminated. And this contamination lasted from 1953 to 1987, to the best of our knowledge at this point. And so at the beginning, the government kind of tried to push the responsibility off on a dry cleaning facility that was nearby. But decades later, they finally came out and said that, okay, that may be a factor, but we're now at a point where we are accepting responsibility, and we think that a lot of this is coming from these underground storage tanks that held fuel and other things like that to fuel the things that we needed on the camp itself that were leaking into that water supply. So what everybody knows now is that contaminated water supply has led to an increased incidence in different types of cancer: breast cancer, pancreatic cancer, kidney cancer, liver cancer, anything that you would think of in that digestive tract where you're swallowing that water on down into the system, infertility issues, things of that nature, breast cancer. And what's interesting is that this act really is one of the very first times and one of the only times that the federal government has accepted responsibility and has allowed a private right of action for these veterans to bring against the government. And it not only applies to the veterans, and I think that that's very important, is that it's not only the veterans, but it's their wives, their children, their everybody that would have been stationed there with them at Camp Lejeune. And that's important because it certainly expands the number of people that would have been impacted to this water supply. The electricians that would have been out there doing work on a day-to-day basis, meaning the contractors, the subcontractors that would have worked at Camp Lejeune, all of those people. And they're saying that if you had been exposed to this water supply for up to 30 days, that would certainly qualify you for reaching that exposure level that would have raised your volatile compounds in your body to such a level that it would be reasonable for you to have been diagnosed with cancer, as terrible as that is.
Wow.
That was a mouthful.
I know.
But you summarized it so well. Thank you for that, because I think that
Sure.
educational component and background is key to tonight's callers and questions.